So I'll confess to you the reason why I want to hit this topic, and it's often because when I'm out in public, maybe out for dinner, maybe out with some friends for a drink, and inevitably somebody will either ask me, what do you do? You know, because when you meet people that are new, we don't know what to say, so we're like, what do you do? And I used to say that I was a leader of a nonprofit agency, and then because every time I say I'm a pastor, then a few things happen. One is they quit cussing around me, maybe because they're just trying to be respectful, or they think that I have sensitive ears. But another thing is inevitably, about 8 times out of 10, they start to ask me questions about the afterlife and about death. And so I was actually reaching out to some pastors, some fellow pastors this last week. They were like, that is so true. Every time we go anywhere, we get asked about the afterlife. So I want to talk about it, because there's a lot of people that have questions about the afterlife. And just to be fun, I want to just call it, so you're dead, now what? Because the reality is we all die. And so for the next 4 weeks, we're going to talk about the afterlife. We're going to talk about heaven and hell and the biblical view of the final judgment. And one of the reasons why I think this is important to talk about is because this is true. This says that what we believe about the afterlife affects how we live this life. Whatever we believe about what happens after it all will dictate how we live our current lives, how we determine to live this life. And as a culture, we are fascinated by the afterlife. There are TV shows about the paranormal and about ghosts and people communicating with the dead. Man, I loved the ghost shows, the ghost hunting shows. And my wife doesn't like them as much, but I do. There's always a constant stream of movies out about ghosts or heaven or hell. There's always a bunch of books out about it that people snatch up, best-selling books. Like one a while back was called 90 Minutes in Heaven. It was written by a man who had died and then was resuscitated after 90 minutes. There was another one about the opposite called 23 Minutes in Hell, which, by the way, was terrifying. It was hard to sleep after that one. There's a book called The Proof of Heaven and Heaven is Real, or We Never Die was a book called It's the Secrets of the Afterlife. So, humanity has a fascination with the afterlife. It is natural. In fact, it's been natural for humanity basically through all of recorded history that we're curious about it. So, the next 4 weeks, we're going to take a look at what the Bible teaches us, what we can understand from the Bible. We're going to learn from our own experience, from even modern science, about how all of this can apply to our daily lives and why it matters. So, starting today, we're going to focus on one major question about the afterlife, and then we're going to have questions throughout the next few weeks. And today's question is this: what happens to us after we die? What happens to us? So the next few weeks, we'll go about hell. That'll be fun next week. It'll be a hell of a sermon next week. See, some of you got that. We'll talk about judgment and then heaven. And in case you popped in a little bit after the beginning of the service, just another reminder to please use the study guides that we put out. And it's just to help you get deeper into it. And then join me Wednesday for Digging Deeper as we'll get even more into this afterlife concept. Now, first I want to start with, if you don't mind, it's warm in here. It is that time of year where it's cold in the morning and it's warm in the afternoon, and these buildings, they can't figure it out. And so, all right, see, now I can do exercises up here. The Pew Research Center, you may have heard about them. They're well known, and their whole existence is to research things, to take polls, to figure out what people think about certain things. And they've done a recent poll about the U.S. population and what they believe about when they die. And what they found out is that 17% of the U.S. population believes that when you die, that's it. That there's no soul, that there's just a brain, and when the brain stops functioning, then you cease to exist. That's about 17 cents. 17% of the American public. Let's see. About 83%, so 17 and 83, that makes you math people out there, 100. So the other 83% believe there is some sort of afterlife. They all vary on what they think the afterlife looks like. 13% believe that there is a heaven, but that there is no hell. And 1%, I don't understand this one, but there's 1% that believes there's a hell, but no heaven. So I guess in their minds, anytime anybody dies, we all just go straight to hell in a handbasket. So 33%, by the way, where did that phrase ever come from? I'm going to hell in a handbasket. Never mind. 33% believe in an afterlife without any heaven or hell. They believe there's something, but there is no heaven or hell. And about 25% of the U.S. population polled believes in reincarnation. And that number has slowly increased. The idea that when you die, you come back in one way or another after death. 61%, though, of the U.S. population believes in something that is like the traditional Christian understanding of resurrection, that we have a soul, and after we die, the soul lives on, our memories are preserved, we ourselves have a chance to be reunited with people that we love who have died before us. And that view includes both a heaven and a hell, which, again, I'll get into in a few weeks. But when I was thinking about this, I thought it would be helpful to begin by talking about the difference between a couple things. Resurrection is one, but then reincarnation, because reincarnation belief has started to increase in the United States. 50 years ago, people probably would have never even thought much of it. But as we are a country of people that aren't necessarily indigenous to here, now there are some, which we've kind of relegated to the fringes of society, and that's not a political statement, it just is. But as more and more people come from all over the world, they bring their religious preferences and understandings, and so sometimes those things start to grow with popularity here. So people in the United States 50 years ago, very few would have believed in reincarnation, but with more Hindus and Buddhists, the reincarnation that comes from Eastern religions has come with it. People tend to think that reincarnation is, any golfers out there? Just like a couple. It's like a mulligan. It's like a do-over. And by the way, that sounds so appealing. You know, as I look back at all the mistakes like the one mistake I've made, I would love to be able to redo that. But you need to know that that's not really what Hindus or Buddhists believe about reincarnation. They don't think of reincarnation as a positive thing. The goal of reincarnation in Hinduism and Buddhism is actually to escape reincarnation, to eventually not be reincarnated. The traditional belief in reincarnation is that you go from life to life to life, carrying either good karma or bad karma with you, depending on the good and the bad that you have done in your current life, hoping that the good karma will outweigh so that whenever you return, you're in a favorable position. If the bad karma is more than the good, then you might return to a more difficult life, maybe born into poverty or sickness, maybe a cancer, but just something more difficult. And you go through all of these seasons until you get it right for the next life. Hopefully you can build on that. Another traditional belief around reincarnation is that when you die, you do it again and again and again and again. And every time you do, your memory is gone, it's wiped clean. You're not reunited with the people that you love. You can't go back and right the wrongs that had happened. You have no knowledge of them. And according to some, this cycle could last millions of times until finally the hope is that you're released from this cycle of death and rebirth. And that release is called moksha. It means literally liberation, which will eventually take you to nirvana, which is not the 90s grunge band, by the way. But nirvana, this place that's described as like a drop returning to the ocean. You just cease to exist and you're absorbed into the cosmos. So that's where reincarnation really, and by the way, that was like reincarnation in just a few minutes. There's so much more to it. But it's very different than a Christian view of resurrection, which I want to get into today. The Christian view of resurrection says that human beings, us, that we only die once. And after that, we stand before Christ, and there's this opportunity to spend eternity with God. The Christian understanding is what we believe in our tradition. Here, it's this idea that we carry ourselves with us into the afterlife, our identity. Hopefully, maybe the good parts of our identity, and maybe whittle off some of the, none of you have negative parts of your identity. Our souls, we believe, they go with us into the next life. And when we go to the next life, we're actually given a body, a physical body, a resurrection body, which I'll get into when we talk about heaven. In resurrection, we believe that we have the opportunity to be with Christ, to be with all of those that we have known, like all of you in heaven for all of eternity. And a big reason why Christians believe this, we have this understanding, is because of the words of Jesus. Like this, in the book of John, Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life, and those who believe in me will live even though they die. Meaning they will die, but they will live in me. And he even makes it more personal in the book of John, where he says, listen, do not let your hearts be troubled in this world. Trust in God and trust also in me, because in my Father's house there are many rooms, and if it were not so, then I would have told you. And I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go there and I prepare a place for you, I will come back and I will take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. So we get these words of Jesus saying that there is something after this, and you will come, I will come back and you will be with me. That's the picture that Jesus painted. Not one of reincarnating over and over again. No, it's from living on this earth to moving on from this earth to a new life with him, a life with a distinct identity. And a key word in that passage, Jesus says, is trust in me. Trust. We often talk about I have a belief in Jesus or a faith in Jesus, and really that is a trust. Trust in what Jesus said. So much of what we believe is a matter of trust. We take reason and we take intellect and understanding as far as we can in faith, but at some point, you just have to trust. Now, what Jesus said, if you're a thinking person, often raises some questions. And so we're going to kind of go through a few, like what happens right after we die? Not like way down the road, but right after we die. And some Christians, we have varying views on this, by the way, depending on your theological bent. Some believe that when we die, we go into a sleep that may last for a very long time until the day that Jesus returns to earth, and then we wake up and we join him in heaven. Other Christians believe that when we die, we go immediately into the presence of God. Some believe one way, some believe it the other way. I mean, why is that? Well, it's because your New Testament talks about both. The authors in your New Testament kind of give the idea of both of them. Like in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul is writing to a church. He's talking about all of this, and he gives this picture that when you die, that those before you are raised in Jesus, that you will actually sleep in the grave for quite some time before Jesus comes back. But then there are other passages that seem to say that is the exact opposite, that after we die, that we immediately stand before God. And I just want you to know, that's what I've come to believe. I've come to believe in that we stand right before God, because to me, it fits a better picture of most of Scripture, and logically, it makes sense to me, because why or what would be the purpose of sleeping for 10 years or 1,000 years or whatever it is until the Lord returns? Now, if you're sleeping, you probably wouldn't know any difference, right? So, but why? I don't think God would do that to us. And for me, one of the reasons why I believe that is because of this important passage in the life of Jesus where he is there hanging on the cross during the crucifixion. It says that there's a couple criminals there. One of them mocks Jesus. One trusts in Jesus. And he says to Jesus, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise. He didn't say, you're going to go to sleep for a while. You're going to rest for a while, and someday I'm going to return in the future. Now, he says today that you will be with me in paradise, which tells me that if I were to die today, I believe that I would see Jesus on this day. Now, granted, if I sleep for a few years or more, I might not know the difference, But that's just what I believe. And by the way, I think it's safe to say that it is okay to believe either one of those. We don't have to be uniform in every single thing we think about faith to be united as one. Ultimately, I think that we can't say for sure one way or another how to believe. We're just called to trust God and trust that Jesus has got all this part figured out. That's what I'm going to do. So, like I say often, I could be wrong, right? But I'm going to trust God to be God, which leads to another question. What difference does believing in the resurrection then make for us Christians? Because Christians, our whole faith started with an event, with the resurrection. Because that happened well before we had a New Testament, well before any churches were around that had a common language. But there was an event, it was a resurrection. So why does believing in that change my daily life? What does it have to do with the afterlife? Listen, I believe it matters because it matters because if your belief in the afterlife and resurrection is like what I've just described a little bit ago, it is going to enhance your life here and now. Your belief in the afterlife, I believe, actually makes you a better human. It should anyway. It should make you be a better human. If that is the sort of faith that you have, it should make you bolder. It should make you more courageous in your faith. If you didn't have a belief in the afterlife, then what would be the point? The belief in an afterlife gives you peace in the midst of some of the hardest times in life. I mean, here's what I mean. In 2 Corinthians, in this part of the passage that we just heard, Paul says, do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs all of them. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal. Paul is writing to this church that has troubles. They're facing hardships in life and persecution in life. And we deal with those sorts of things, hardships in life. For Paul, he knew a thing or two about hardships. He was tortured. He was flogged within an inch of his life. He was imprisoned over and over. He was shipwrecked. He was persecuted by fellow Jews that he knew, by pagans, by even some Christians who thought that his theology was the wrong theology. I know, Christians bashing on other Christians, that would never happen with you, right? Come on, Boy Scout promise, whatever that one is. But he knows the thing about a hardship. Eventually, Paul would have his head removed. He'd be beheaded because of his faith. But despite all of that he went through, he says, don't lose heart. How can he say don't lose heart? Is because he has a view of what the future is. In fact, he says it twice in chapter 4, don't lose heart, which means we don't despair and we don't give up. Why? He goes on to say, it's because even though the things that we can see, that everything in nature begins to waste away, and he's talking about our physical bodies, he says our inside, our inner being is being renewed day by day. And you all know that our bodies decline over time, particularly after 40. It goes down. Although scientifically speaking, our bodies start to kind of break down more the process begins a little bit more in our 20s. He says our outer nature is wasting away, but our inner nature is being renewed. And that means when we have a faith and a trust in God, God's Spirit renews us, even though everything on the outside of us may be falling apart, decaying, and dying. See, how you view the afterlife, man, really determines how you live this life. Because if all you can focus on is your body, then you are destined to be miserable. Because your body will never be enough for you. You can have all the kind of tucks and scrapes and procedures and pills, but there's no amount of hard work that's going to get rid of crow's feet. I would say love handles, but some of you would be like, well, no, there's this exercise you could do. I'm telling you, I'm going to have love handles till I die. And I'm going to love them. No matter what we do to overcome the effects of aging, I mean, LASIK for our eyesight, hearing aids for our ears, that little blue pill for, you know. If you don't know, ask somebody around you after church. No matter what you do, your outer nature, my outer nature is going to waste away. And if that's all we have, then inevitably we're just going to be sad and miserable because you'll start to see your body fading away right before your eyes, unless you're fortunate enough that your eyesight's the first thing that goes. But if you realize that there is an inner nature and that you will live on and that it can be renewed day after day, then you will always have hope. There will always be a source of peace that you can find because that comes with it. But then Paul continues on in this. I want to break it down a little bit more. He says, for our light and momentary troubles, I'm going to pause right there in the middle, our light and momentary troubles. He calls the hardships that we have momentary troubles. It's just, to me, I've had some hardships that just don't seem momentary. Am I right, or is it just me? Yeah, but he's describing it as momentary troubles. And I think it's because for him, if you believe in the resurrection of the body and the soul, then you can look differently at everything. That even though you may have that diagnosis, it's going to be months or years in the process, you can consider it tiny compared to eternity. He continues on, the light momentary troubles, he says, are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. And this lets me know that our suffering, God never lets our suffering go to waste. He never lets our hardships go to waste. And I don't believe, by the way, that God sends suffering into our lives, because it's been my experience that I've done just a fine job of bringing on suffering into my own life. But God can use this suffering. God tells us that if you encounter suffering, I promise that I will be there with you through it, and I can make something good come out of it in return that will affect your eternity. That's what Christians believe. So we look at suffering that shapes us for an eternal life, that we can still find joy because we know what's to come. It outweighs all of the suffering that we have. And when Paul talks about a life that we can see and that we cannot see, what he's doing, he's pointing to all the stuff in life that is really just fleeting. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow. The stuff of life just goes away. And I think about this time of year, because this is the time of year when you drive down the neighborhoods and you see little signs put out there, right, that says garage sale, yard sale, rummage sale. When we were down in Southwest Missouri, it was rummage sales. Do you have rummage sales up here? Or are we more garage people? I think about this because there on the lawn or in somebody's house is the contents of somebody's life. That at one point they thought it was so important that they needed to have it, and there it is on sale for a quarter or a couple bucks or $10. Our stuff and our houses, our retirement funds and all of those things, they're important and we're grateful for them and we enjoy them, but ultimately when it comes to eternity, they are irrelevant because they all go away. What I think it's said in a song that you can't take it with you. There's no U-Haul being hauled behind a hearse. I think I heard it that way. So what we're taught in our faith is we hold on to things lightly and temporarily. We give things away, be generous, because it's all temporary in light of eternity. And our belief in the afterlife is what makes us be able to live this way. Most of the people in the world that are very generous, it's because they have embraced this idea that everything they have is for the purpose for now because they don't need it in the future. But also, I do recognize that quite a few people are afraid of death. It's uncertain. So we look at death, we're afraid of it, and we do everything we can to put it off as long as possible, which is a good thing, by the way. We think to ourselves different things. Maybe I'll just cryogenically freeze my body. That's relatively new in human history. Or maybe if you can't afford the whole body, just the head. So that whenever technology comes back, you'll be able to be reanimated and you will continue to live on. In many ways, we are all obsessed with living longer. And statistically speaking, we are living longer as humans based on our ancestors. I'm acutely aware of this. I mean, we treat diseases, we have medications that prolong life. For me, About 20 years ago, I had metal rods inserted in my back. And then about 6 years ago, they took them out and replaced them and went higher. And I know that without that, my life would be very different. So 12 years ago, not just my back, they actually put a little metal plate in my neck. Because as they said it to me, it's not a matter of if, it's when I'm going to go paralyzed from the neck down. Meaning, my life would not feel like just a momentary trouble. But my life expectancy would have shortened. I mean, medical advancements have definitely improved my life. It has helped me live to be here, and I believe that it has extended it. Now, back though to, let's talk about cryogenically freezing our bodies again, because as wonderful as life is, even at its best, if you are unfrozen, guess what? You're still gonna die. That's the truth. You're still going to get sick. You're still going to face death of people that you love. If you live in America, you're still going to pay taxes. You're still going to complain about paying taxes, but you're going to do it anyway. So many try to postpone death. But you know what? Christians see death differently. We see death as a final victory, not a final defeat. Years ago, a guy came to church with a t-shirt that says, "Christians are like zombies. They just don't stay dead." That is our belief. And it gives us hope. Now, let me ask, I'll just say, do I want to die soon? No, I just want you to know that. I want to stick around with my family for quite some time. I want to see my children and my grandchildren discover new things in life. I want to see maybe another grandchild. My kids, they haven't capitulated to that one, and maybe if they're listening, please, Father's Day is coming up, right? I want to see things in life. I want to see the Royals win the World Series again. And I know that takes about 30 years every time they do it. So, if it happens again, I'll be in my mid-70s, which I plan on be kicking around then. I want to see the New Orleans Saints wins the Super Bowl again, which I know is probably going way too far. We Chiefs fans, though, we just got it too easy right now. Our years of suffering, now we have joy, right? I want to stick around with you. I want to see how life unfolds on this planet. I figure there's got to be 20 more or so new iPhones to discover. I want to see what all the apps are. I don't want to die soon. But you know what? I'm not afraid to die. Yeah, I'm a little anxious because I've never been there. I don't know truly what it's like, but I trust that at my death, I'm going to enter into this fullness of life that I don't think my brain can fully grasp in this moment. You see, our perspective on death is very different when you're a follower of Jesus because we believe in a resurrection body. We believe that there's something else and something joyous. Now, let me end with a parable. This is a story I heard a long time ago, and it's been attributed to the writings of Pablo Molinero, but there's a bunch of different versions of this. It's a parable, it's a story that begins this way. In a mother's womb, there are two babies, and the first baby asks the other, "Do you believe in life after delivery?" The second baby replied, "Why, of course, there has to be something after delivery. Maybe we're here to prepare ourselves for what will be later." "Nonsense," says the first. "There is no life after delivery. What would that life be?" "Well, I don't know, but there's got to be more light than there is in here. Maybe we'll walk and maybe with our legs, maybe we'll eat stuff with our mouths." And then the doubting baby laughed. "That's absurd. We all know walking is impossible and eating with our mouths, ridiculous. This cord here, this umbilical cord, and it's too short to walk around." And the second baby held his ground. "I think there's something, and maybe it's different than what we see here." The first baby replied, "Well, no one ever comes back from delivery. No one ever returns. Delivery is the end of life, and in the after delivery, it is nothing but darkness and anxiety, and it goes nowhere. Well, I don't know, said the twin. But certainly we'll see Mother, and she will take care of us. Mother? The first baby guffawed. I love that word, guffawed. You believe in Mother? Well, where is she now? And the second baby calmly and patiently tried to explain. Well, she's all around us. It's in her that we live, and without her, this world would not exist. He says, I don't see her. I don't see it. It's only logical that she doesn't exist. To which the other replied, sometimes when you're in silence, you can hear and you can perceive her. I believe that there's a reality after delivery, and we are here to prepare ourselves for that reality that is to come. That's the Christian view on the afterlife. We see this life, we believe that this life is a preparation of what's to come. Christians believe that death has been swallowed up in victory because of the resurrection of Jesus from the grave. And because of that, we are people of boldness and courage and people of life and people of afterlife. So, may we live this life with that trust that there is something so much grander, so much more than what we see. The trust and the hope of a life that is to come. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Let's